Many doubted we'd ever see it, but here it is. The return to glory.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Outsiders. This is podcast number 26, and it's Bryn Griffiths along with Robin Brownlee. Hey, Robin, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you today?
Excellent, thank you. Fall is in the air. Training camp with the National Hockey League. Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
How weird is this? How weird is this, where this is the time of year where everybody's getting that little extra jump in their stride because, you know, preseason's just begun in the National Hockey League. The Canadian Football League is coming down. Oh, hang on a minute. We can't even go down that road with the CFL anymore. It's just everything. This has just been a weird year.
Yeah, I mean, as we speak, I'm staring out my window at the autumn colors as we prepare to play the next game in the Stanley Cup final. That throws the body clock just a bit off.
Which is probably over by the time most people have downloaded this. It's like I said, 2020 has just been a very bizarre year. Just a lot of strange stuff going on. The only thing that has been and the Blue Jays are in kind of a little mini playoff and that kind of stuff, wild card. The only thing that's really been consistent at any level is the National Football League is just basically plowing ahead like it normally does. That's the only sense of normality that I've seen off the top of my head.
Well, you used to be able to set your watch by the seasons. We'd talk about the overlap and you know, based on when the World Series is, when the Stanley Cup playoffs are. So, you know, it's all out of whack, like you say. Very few of the leagues are ticking on as normally, and some, as we know, aren't ticking on at all.
Let's talk about our guests coming up on the show today. Our headliner is going to be the general manager of the Minnesota Wild, Bill Guerin, who we both know very well. In fact, this is an interview that I think we've been sitting on since January. The very first week of January, I ran into Billy at the World Junior Hockey Championship in Ostrava in the Czech Republic. And I said, hey, by the way, Robin Brownlee and I've got a podcast. You want to come on and join us? He goes, yeah. I said, how are you in the next couple weeks? Yeah, I'm fine.
Sure.
I'll be great. That's great. Super. Here's all my contact info. Get a hold of me. I said, do I have to go through your people? And he kind of laughed. He said, no, I know you guys. So anyway, so we lined up the interview. And then the night before we were going to do the interview with Billy, I get taken to hospital with a bleeding ulcer. And that was in January. And now here we are just going into the month of October. And once again, 2020, weird year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I looked at my text and the last message from Billy before we started talking again is keep me up to speed on Bryn. And that up to speed lasted something like 6 months. But yeah, when we got back to him, he's happy to get going. And here's the thing, you know, the timing works in the sense that Billy's been busy. He came into the position in Minnesota. He had a long look, figured out what he saw. And clearly what he saw required some change. So Billy's been one of the busiest GMs to this point, and I'm looking forward to asking him about that, among other things.
Let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about the Stanley Cup final. It's been the Dallas Stars and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The final, I don't know, and we talked about it last week. I've almost been a little bit bored by it, and I don't know exactly why, other than the fact that maybe it's just the time of year and our focus in Canada is a little different. If we can get an extra round of golf in at this time of year, guys are opting for the golf over the hockey. I don't know. It's hard to say, but the last few games have been quite entertaining. Corey Perry, wow. We talked about him last week as well. He clearly doesn't want to bow out gracefully here. He is almost willing Dallas. As I said, we're recording this before Game 6, so who knows how this turned out, but he's been a powerful force, and I'm not surprised. He and Pavelski, Jamie Benn has really started to pick it up here a little bit. The Dallas Stars have showed that they've got a little bit of fight in them. I'm not surprised by that, and Tampa's doing amazing things with Braden Point and no Steven Stamkos.
You know what, Brent? I'm a bit surprised by Perry. There were times in the last couple of years where when I saw Corey play, he looked used up to me. He plays a hard game, and he's not an old man yet, but he's not a young man either. This, I'll call it a resurgence during the playoffs. He's been a money guy, and players like him play for these moments. I'm just surprised he's got enough left in the tank. He knows what to do. I'm just a little bit surprised that he still can do it.
Have to congratulate the National Hockey League. They've done a nice job in pulling this bubble thing off in both Toronto and Edmonton. But we'll talk more about that next week when the headliner on our podcast will be Chris Cuthbert from Sportsnet. Chris did the Western games with Louis DeBrusque, did a fantastic job. We'll talk about the whole bubble thing more then, but I just want to get one thing off my chest here. So, this is a U.S. reporter from down south. I can't even remember who it was, nor do I care at this point. And all they were doing were bitching and whining about the fact that there's no excitement level or energy level outside of the 2-block radius of Rogers Place in Edmonton over a Stanley Cup final being played here in the Alberta capital. And I'm thinking to myself, it's Dallas and Tampa. There's no Edmonton Oilers involved in this. If it was the Edmonton Oilers involved in this, trust me, the energy level would be far higher. But it's really been a big thing to dump on both Toronto and Edmonton for this whole bubble thing. And not enough amenities for the players. Not enough this. The food has been okay. It hasn't been great. It hasn't been 5-star. We can Bill was here for a while. We can ask him how his experience went. I know he wanted it to go longer, but both Toronto and Edmonton should be congratulated, not dumped on, for being able to pull this thing off with the National Hockey League. And we thought we had one positive test, and we're now hearing that they haven't had a single one. I just would like to get the hub thing and the bubble thing over with so we can just get back to normal and people could just dump on the city for it's too cold. The usual stuff that people want to dump on Western Canadian cities for. I thought to myself, if this was reversed and it was the Calgary Flames or the Edmonton Oilers taking on the Carolina Hurricanes or the Montreal Canadiens in Tampa, would they give a shit? No, they wouldn't. So what are people expecting? There's going to be parades and parties? I don't know. I don't know what the expectation level was of that, but I'll guarantee you one thing. Canadians will tune in when they know that cup is going to be handed out. That's for sure. But whether or not there's going to be excitement level at the bars, right now people don't even know if they can go to certain bars, right? I mean, like I said, 2020 has just been a weird, bizarre year.
Many years ago now, I want to say maybe 12 or 13, Rob Tichkowski and I were down in Nashville, and we were out doing some shopping, and we both walked into a t-shirt shop. And it's funny how the mind thinks. Almost in tandem, we said, I got to have that shirt. And it was a t-shirt that said, President of the Piss and Moan About Everything Club. And sometimes I think that you could hand those out by the palletful when it comes to what you're talking about. You know what? It's a regional thing. If your team's not in it, you don't care. What do they expect? Do they expect a big buzz in, down in Florida? If it was the Oilers, like you say, the Oilers and the Carolina Hurricanes? No. If your team's not in it, with everything else that's going on, the oddness of the timing, let's not forget the pandemic that has put us here. There's more important things to think about. Oh, and by the way, there's a presidential election on in the country where most of the teams are. There's lots of reasons why there's no buzz. It's not about Edmonton. It's not about the bubble. This is the way it happens every year.
The other thing too, we get only really 3 months of summer where we're at. So you got to make these hard choices between, as I said, maybe you're going to go golfing. Maybe you're going to head out to the lake. A Stanley Cup final on an excitement level, I just shake my head. I've been laughing all the way through it. I'm going, oh my God, is there nothing else to talk about other than that? And yet here we are talking about it. Sorry, Robin, here I am talking about it. You didn't bring it up. Let's get back on track here. The draft is coming up here on the 6th of October. It's a virtual draft. Now, it'll be broadcast on television, but it's not going to be anywhere close to being the way it used to be. And there was that excitement. You want to talk about excitement level. It's always fun to be in the city that's holding the draft. That one I get.
Well, you know what? For me, a lot of the fun, and as a reporter, was watching the kids, watching their families, and watching the reaction, sometimes good, sometimes bad. I never forget the look on Eric Lindros' face when he was drafted after saying, "Don't take me, don't take me." That for the fans, I think they'll miss. The virtual thing is not going to be the same. The kids will miss that experience, the players who are actually being drafted. So again, put that on the long list of things that have changed, but we'll deal with it. We'll get through it. Kind of tough for, hey, it's kind of tough for kids that are having their big day in this kind of setup, but hey, it's kind of tough for kids who missed out on a normal grad at the end of school year last year because of COVID. Everybody, it's changed everything. That's not too broad a statement, and this is one of those things.
I've seen it from both sides. I've seen it as a reporter, and I've also seen it from working for the team where I've been sticking name bars on jerseys seconds before the name is called out. Because when I was working for, let's say, the Edmonton Oilers, we were selecting probably, maybe anywhere from 12 to 18 generally, like in the middle of the pack. So it's not like you were able to have the number one guy in your brain the moment you went to the draft like they did for Connor McDavid, for example, in Fort Lauderdale. So you would get a bunch of name bars done up with Velcro on it. And then, of course, when you're getting close, maybe a couple picks away, you would check in with the big brass and say, who are we looking at here? And they would give you maybe about 2 or 3 names, so you'd get those 2 or 3 name bars ready. You'd flatten out the jersey underneath the table, so it was all set to go. And then you'd get down to the pick before your pick. Are we any major changes here? No, we're right now. It looks like we're going with X. Yeah. And so you'd get those name bars done, and then of course the moment you were on the clock, it would be okay. So who are we taking? And they would tell you. So underneath you'd put the name bar out there, and it would look good. It would look, you couldn't tell, but it was always that's kind of, it's the fun stuff like that I still miss. That was fun for me. And then you would hand the jersey off to, at that time, Bill Tawilli, who was the vice president of public and media relations. And Bill would take the jersey and hand the jersey off to Glenn Sather, who would then call out the name. The kid would come up. He would give his sports coat or his suit coat to Bill as he went up there, and basically his shirt and tie. And then you'd do the jersey thing, and then you'd wander around holding on to this kid's suit jacket for probably about 25 minutes as he'd run the whole circuit. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff behind the scenes as well, not just what people saw on television, but it's going to be a little different this year, that's for sure. Actually, you know what, Robin? We might actually be able to go further behind the scenes now in a virtual world than we've ever done before. So this might actually be better, not worse.
Oh, I don't know about that. I used to put on a disguise and skulk around and stalk the draft picks down below the seats, and nobody knew it was me. And I kid. You know what? The behind the scenes stuff was a lot of fun. The fans don't get to see a lot of it. I mean, it won't affect them in this sense. I used to love, I remember talking to Alex Hemsky when he could barely speak English, Jim Matheson and I talking to him. That was one where he basically blushed every question you asked him. He was that kind of kid. The language was the issue. Or talking to a guy like Robbie Schremp, who dropped like a stone before the Oilers took him the year they took Devin Dubnyk 14th and then picked up Schremp 25th, I want to say. Now, I'm paraphrasing because I don't want to give him a bum rap, but Robbie was a confident kid, and we weren't that far from talking about his number being retired at some point in his career. Fans don't get to see that, but that's part of the fun for us. Like I say, part of the fun for them is all the other stuff. And again, it's sort of like, too bad this year. We'll get back to normal at some point, but this year's not going to be it.
I'm sure you have one or two stories that are takeaway stories for you at drafts. It's one thing just to sit there and watch the first round picks, but I'll use the McDavid draft in Fort Lauderdale down there as a reporter, because when you're in Edmonton and you're selecting number one and you got a guy like Connor McDavid who is going to be your team's selection. That story, I mean, we wrote those stories and we broadcast those stories weeks ahead of the draft. There was really not a lot to talk about. My takeaway from that draft was the last selection the Oilers made in that draft, if I recall correctly, was Ethan Bear. And so I remember having a chat with Ethan and his family underneath the seats after he'd done, it was a great conversation because we weren't on the clock. There was the chaos around Connor at the front end of the draft, but at the back end, it was way more relaxed, and the next day. And I'll never forget that conversation because he was just so excited to get drafted, and you could see how much it meant to the family. It meant a lot to the people at the Ochapowace First Nations in Saskatchewan. I don't know. It's just, like I said, for me as a reporter, I tend to remember that kind of stuff from drafts than the traditional mayhem.
Well, I tell you, here's one that the fans don't see. It's funny. I want to say it had to have been Toronto because it was Lake Ontario, and I think it was Jesse Niinamaki the Oilers drafted that year. If I've got it wrong, it's because my memory fades, but I do remember this. Post-draft, my questions were of the tone of, what the hell are you guys doing? And they went so far off the board for Niinamaki. I want to keep thinking it was him. Anyway, as was the case at times, the team would sometimes invite the beat writers and the people who covered the team to a post-draft, event. Well, the event this year was on a boat ride out on Lake Ontario. And I remember getting on the boat, and Kevin Prendergast, the chief scout, was sitting at the end of the bar glaring at me, but he never came over. And I thought, oh, shit. Because, like I say, my questions, I think he knew what was going to be in the paper the next day. He did not move, and he did not take his eyes off me until they pulled what I want to call is the ramp or the gangplank. Once the gangplank was pulled onto the boat and I couldn't get off, it was a beeline for the beat guy. And man, did I hear about it for as long as I cared to. One of those little scenarios you don't forget. But the reporter was quartered. I didn't have any place to go, and KP was going to have his say. And
here you are, so you didn't get thrown overboard. So, that's kind of nice. Hey, one last thing before we take a break. We have free agent frenzy coming up, too. It falls in Canada, or used to fall in Canada, on Canada Day. So it's almost like it was a national holiday, so people could just kind of tune in free agent frenzy. This time around, it's not falling on a holiday. It's not like it's falling on the Thanksgiving holiday Monday or anything. I'm just kind of curious to know how much different it's going to be for fans to follow along, or are people still going to be following along on their mobile devices at work? Are you going to be able to talk about it as much? Is there going to be a lot of chatter on Twitter and Facebook, pictures on Instagram, that kind of stuff? It's just going to, like I said, we've had to adapt to so much this year, and yet here we have all these things like the draft and free agent frenzy happening in different ways, and I guess I don't like the term the new normal, but it's just going to seem different again.
Well, I tell you, I don't think it's going to be that different, Bryn. You mentioned social media. That's where we see most of it now. When a guy signs, it's on Twitter before it's anywhere else. All the conversations and the signings and the rumors, to a large extent, appear on social media before they appear anywhere else. There's not that huge gathering like there is at the draft. So this is all behind closed doors anyway. I think it'll have, of all the things that the pandemic has had an impact on, I think free agency will be the most minor of all of them. Reporters always have to, okay, here's the number of the guy you signed with your team. they're not in the city that you're at, unless they happen to come and sign and you get an availability. But for the most part, I don't think it's going to change much, Bryn, at least not for the fans. They're going to get their news quick. So I don't see a big wave there. By the way, before we go to our break, because I know we got Billy Guerin on tap, you said one more thing. I got to say one more.
Hang on a second, because I know what you're going to talk about. I want to do it at the end of the show. And the reason being is we're not guaranteed we're going to get Bill Guerin, right? Because he's been so active.
Maybe he's working
on a big deal or something. We have no guarantee. You want to talk about longevity, right? Is that what you want to talk about? You want to talk about a guy who worked at a place for 49 years and then basically got punted? And we'll use a football term?
Yes, I do.
Okay, we're definitely going to talk about that. And we're just not going to be a passing mention either. I want to talk about it in a little deeper level. But like I said, let's make sure we get our headliner on first here, and we're going to try to endeavor to do that coming up in a couple of moments. We do have to tell you that The Outsiders is brought to you by the Macintosh Group at Remax River City. I've known Brent McIntosh for a very, very long time. Great guy. Does an unbelievable job. How many houses have you had to sell or buy, Robin, over your long life? You know how important a realtor can be.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I tell you what, you get the right guy, it can be the best experience you've had. You get the wrong guy, not so much.
Well, Brent is just a weird guy. No, I'm just kidding. Brent is a great guy. We've been hearing an awful lot about how tough the real estate market is in the Edmonton area for sellers over the last few years. But I think things are kind of making a bit of a turnaround. And I'm hearing that more and more. Average days on the market is something that people are always concerned about. And the other thing that a lot of people are concerned about these days are house values, that type of thing. Now, Brent and his team have got it down to an art because, we've talked about the 3 Ps of real estate sales. Put up a sign, put it on MLS, and then pray that somebody calls. But one of the things that Brent and his group at Remax River City, they add a 4th P, and that is having a plan on how to sell your home for the most amount of money in the least amount of time. And who could ask for anything other than that? That's exactly what you want to hear out of good people who are looking after your home. So if you're interested in giving Brent a shot, they would love to hear from you, and you can reach them now. It's pretty simple. You can check them out online at macintoshgroup.ca or give them a call directly at 780-464-0075. So once again, macintoshgroup.ca. The phone number is 780, and that is 464-0075. And when you get a hold of them, make sure you tell them that the Outsiders told you to call. That's an important thing. Coming up, fingers crossed that we'll get the general manager of the Minnesota Wild joining us here on The Outsiders. So anyway, I'm at the World Junior Hockey Championship, and I'm upstairs in one of the media locations, and Bill Guerin walks by. And so, of course, we reconnect. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I said, Robin Brownlee and I are doing a podcast. Can you join us? He says, sure. How about the next couple of weeks? I thought, this is great. So we line it up, and then the night before you're to come on, I get taken down by a bleeding ulcer, which turns into stomach cancer, and I get my stomach out. And this has been the longest set-up interview ever. Here we are now, and going into the month of October, and Bill Guerin, the general manager of the Minnesota Wild, joins us on the podcast today. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing great, Brendan. It's awesome to see you. I know I don't think everybody else is seeing you, but it's good to talk to you. It's good to hear from you, and I'm glad you're doing better, buddy. I'm sure you had a long, hard fight, but it's good to have you.
Well, I had a guy in my corner named Dale Howardchuk who was keeping in constant communication with me for quite some time, and he pumped my tires, got me ready, and it was a tough day to hear that he didn't make it through his battle. But man, you could see his coaching pedigree in getting me all set for my surgery, and I miss him dearly. But I'll never ever forget him and for what he did for me. And the hockey is full full of great people. You're one of them. And I know Robin and I were very excited when we heard that you were taking on this new challenge. But let's go back a little bit here. You had some great training for this gig before you even got into Minnesota. Just tell me a little bit about the experience of working with a true veteran in Pittsburgh who you could just watch operate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I actually, there are a number of people that really helped me along the way, and to be involved on a day-to-day basis with a guy like Jim was fantastic. I mean, he opened everything up to me and gave me the great experience. He trusted me in the role that I had for him. And even before that with Ray Shiro, it was the same. And being in player development, you get to kind of see a lot of different departments and just worked with some great people, like, Tommy Fitzgerald and Jason Bottrell, Randy Sexton, all these guys that have moved on and gotten the same roles that I have. And, or had them before. And it was just a great place to sit and learn.
Billy, at what point does it click in that you think when your playing days are coming to an end that, hey, I want to be in hockey ops. I want to do something with what I've learned over the years. Some guys, when the playing days are over, they walk away. That's right for them. You certainly could have if you wanted to. At what point did it click in where you thought, I could be a manager one day, I could be a front office guy one day?
Well, you know what? To tell you the truth, like as my career kind of got nearing the end, it's just a position that always kind of intrigued me. But then there, the draw for a player is usually, well, a lot of it is to coaching, because that's as close as you get to the action, to the players, to, being on the ice without actually being on the ice. So that's why player development was such a great role for me, because I got some coaching experience in the minors. I got scouting experience. I saw how the managers, handled things like meetings and draft preparation and trade deadline stuff. I was involved in all of that. And it just kind of, it was that manager position, the task of being, putting together your own team, seeing if your philosophies work, what you think is right, does that work? And that's what drives me. And to be honest with you, being out of hockey wasn't an option for me. It's just
really?
Something that, I mean, hey, look, I'm a hockey player. And I'm not going to try to kid myself and go and try to get in real estate or try to do this. I'm a hockey player, and that's to the core, and I was going to be in the game no matter what.
So it's a sanity break for the folks at home too, not just you. I'm guessing they got to be happy to see you go to work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, Kara could not have me at home. This is not. It was. I kind of came in part-time, and she just kind of looked at me. She's like, don't you have work this weekend? Aren't you supposed to be watching some games? I'm like, no, I got the whole weekend, just you and me. And she's like, oh, great.
Well, we're happy that worked out. Now, here's the other question for you is that there's an easy part to your gig and there's a hard part to your gig. We all go through that. What are you finding is effortless? And what are you finding where you're thinking to yourself, "Wow, I gotta work a little bit harder on this"? Is there anything that you could think of off the top of your head?
Not effortless. I mean, this is a great job, but you have to work extremely hard to keep it. I guess the thing that I'm really thankful for and lucky is having a great group of people to work with. Tom Curvers, Chris O'Hearn, Matt Sells, now we have Judd Brackett and Chris Kelleher, all our scouts and our just everybody around me is a good person. I mean, Craig Leopold's a fantastic guy to work for. And they're people over on the business side, and we work together on a daily basis. And there's good people here, and that's what I'm really thankful for. And they make it easy on me in that respect. But there's always something going on. There's always a problem. There's always things to be fixed or managed, or and that's the challenge of it, and that's what I love.
You know, it's interesting, Bill. So many fans, well, around the league. I mean, you played for 8 teams, for crying out loud. A lot of people saw you wear the jersey. You know, here in Edmonton, strange thing. Mac T and Kevin Lowe used to always talk how about even when they were players in New York, hey, wouldn't it be great one day if we could get into this end of the game? And sure enough, they did. And in your time in Edmonton, you had Kevin Lowe as a player at the end of the line. He didn't play much because of that ear condition he had. Then you had him as a coach. Then you had him as a GM. You had one guy in those 3 different roles before you ended up leaving. Did you watch Kevin? Did you have your eyes and ears open for the things that didn't involve just playing? Like, he used to talk about picking things up by just being a player that served him well down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It is kind of funny because, Kevin and I sat next to each other in the locker room. So we were teammates. Then he was a coach. And then once he got his chance at GM, he traded me right away. So, no, Kevin's such a good guy and a great friend. And, but yeah, I did watch him, and I watched how, like, he, you know what, it was, like I said, the natural transition was into coaching. And then he just seemed built for the GM role, but also seeing what the other things that Kevin was doing, like not just in the community, but on the business side, which really said, like, okay, the GM's not just dealing with the hockey team. And it might be like that in some markets, but I didn't see it like that for him. And he was just, then he got into the president's role, and everything was just, there was a lot to do. He was a busy guy. He wasn't sitting on his hands just trying to make trades. He was, extremely busy, and I picked up on that, and he worked his butt up.
Plus, he also had a little bit of slats too, right? If I'm not mistaken. So what do you learn from a guy like Glenn Sather, who had a pretty good track record with great players?
A lot. You know what? And Slats is just, the one thing that I really love about Slats was his swagger and his confidence and his ability to communicate and relate to the guys. But he was always one that would, if we were struggling and he could help us, he would give it to us straight. But then as a team, he would always give us confidence. You know, I remember when we were down to Colorado in the playoffs that one year, we were down 3-1, and we had a team dinner the night before Game 5, and Slats just stood up and he says, "I don't know what the heck you guys are all worried about." He goes, "You got them right where you want them." He goes, just like plain as day, you got them right where you want them. Don't worry. We're going to go out and win tomorrow, and then we're going to just keep tracking them down, and we're going to be fine. And we were all like, "Oh yeah, okay, great, yeah, we're good." And the other thing I remember is he said, "I used to always tell guys back in the day, if you can take Wayne Gretzky's job, I'll give it to you." Nobody ever could, but that's the message to, the group. It's competition. It's competitive. And if you can be better than somebody on that team, then do it. Take their job. And those are two things that I learned from Slats. I mean, 2 of the many, but just being around him a short time was awesome.
And you saw this firsthand, Bill, and of course those of us around Edmonton saw it for years and years. Be honest with the players, shoot straight, and that's good and bad. Players don't want bullshit, good or bad. They want to hear where they're at, where the team's at, and they know when somebody's feeding them a line. Years later now, in your position, you paid your dues. There was talk about you as a possibility in Edmonton. We know Ken Holland ended up here. I mean, talk about opposite ends. You just getting into the GM role. Ken Holland is a proven commodity. But you now, as the man in Minnesota, you sat back, you took the role, and now this season, you've been very busy. And people have asked, well, what about this deal? What about Why did you do? Why isn't Koivu coming back? Why do you trade this guy? Why do you sign that guy? You've been pretty honest in what I've read, and that's the straight shooting part. We have been in the same place for a long time. You're paraphrasing. We've got to get better. I'm not making change for the sake of change. I'm making changes so that this can be a better hockey club. It's like the cards are on the table and there's no BS involved in it.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to the players, like they can smell bullshit a mile away. And you know what? You have to be straight with them. I think they deserve that, and they've earned that respect. And that's always the way I wanted to be treated. And that's what that's how I like to treat our players. And as for the media, you know what? You guys can smell the bullshit too. And there's just why would I try to spin a story that isn't true and give it to you straight? Like it's just where we are. And that's just the way I'm wired, I guess, but it just works for me that way. And if I'm giving away too much, then so be it. But, I felt like I was always treated fairly by my managers. And, even when I was traded, it was, like I remember getting traded from Edmonton. Kevin was just straight up with me and the reasons why. And I appreciated that. It helps you understand. And, that's what I try to do.
If you take a look at the managerial handbook, it doesn't matter on what the profession is. Generally, really good managers kind of sit back a little bit, kind of take stock of what they have as an organization. You've certainly done that. And then this summer, you've kind of started to put way more of your stamp on the organization. What kind of team are you trying to build? Is it a speedy team? Like I enjoyed watching the team perform in the bubble. I know you would have loved to have gone further, but it just looks to me like you're looking for speed, which is so important in the National Hockey League. But that's what I see. What are you shooting for?
Well, you know what? I think, we need to add some speed. But I don't really think you can just focus in on one thing. You need speed, you need skill, you need grit, you need toughness. You need a whole mix of things, and that's what makes a really good team. You look at all the teams that are winning; they have everything, and you can't just focus. You just have to focus on what you feel your weakness is, and try to build that part up. The one thing that I do expect, from our team is to be highly competitive. Like no nights off. I don't, if you're a skilled guy or a grinder or a gritty guy, whatever, you have to compete. You have to compete on a nightly basis. And I want our team to be able to play play our best hockey in the toughest situations.
That's interesting, Bill. And we hear that a lot. And again, in the shoot straight department, there's some guys, and if you're in the National Hockey League as a player, you're a hell of a player just to get there. But competing every shift, not letting defeat get you down, insisting on competing at the highest level. Some guys talk that talk, but they don't walk that walk. And finding somebody who does is not all that easy. There's some great skill out there, or there's guys who give it their all, but really don't have that much skill. They can be depth players. How do you find the guy who can play, who can skate, and would rather crawl through broken glass than lose? That's a tough cat to find, isn't it?
Yeah, they're tough to find. But like you said, like there are different types of players in the NHL, and like you said, some don't have as much skill as others, and some might have a grittier game. But everybody, no matter what your skill level or what, we all have our own way of competing. And Kevin Fiala's high compete game is much different than Marcus Foligno's high compete game. But we have to be okay with both, because those elements, those ingredients, help us be a better team.
Yeah.
And we want those different elements.
You mentioned swagger when you were talking about Glenn Sather. It's fun watching teams get on a bit of a run or a roll in the playoffs or the play-ins, and they get that little swagger and that little energy. And you had an opportunity to watch your team through the early going here. Is it tough just to sit there when you've played the game at such a high level and you've won a couple of cups? Is it tough for you just to sit there and watch it?
Yeah, it is. It was never. It was never like a fun thing to sit there and watch the playoffs after you got knocked out. Like it just stings. And to be honest with you, when I was playing for a while, I didn't watch. And then like I felt like I almost like forgot like how deep you have to go and how much like. So I started watching again, and it just drives you. It just drives you. And we're all competitive people, and we want to be in a position here in Minnesota where we can compete for the Stanley Cup, on a yearly basis, and we have to build to that. And we want to be in the mix as much as everybody else. And it's hard to watch.
Hard to watch, Bill. When the player in you is always there. I remember one road trip we were at Chelsea Piers in New York. And at this point, Kevin Lowe was the GM, for crying out loud. He wasn't even an assistant coach or a coach. And some of the kids were out there, and he's got on the tracksuit and throws on the skates, and they're out digging, and somebody gave him a bit of a shot, and he turns around and he starts hacking and whacking. And it was like, what the hell? This player's thinking, this is my GM. He just punched me in the mouth. There's always that connection there if you've played the game, even if you're a manager, isn't there?
Oh, for sure, yeah. And he earned his nickname Vicious. That's for good reason. He has that, but there's always that connection. There's always that switch. There's always that, And I guess I didn't realize it while I was playing how unique being a National Hockey League player is, and why everybody doesn't do it. There's a different level of intensity and commitment and all that stuff. I saw it when I was doing player development, and I was in Wilkes-Barre, and we were in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And I went into the room after the game, and I saw the guys, and they were like, they're all beat up, and their faces are scratched up and hacked up, but the look in their eyes was different, and you just don't get that in everyday life. So it's just a very unique thing that I found, and you don't really lose it.
We know your phone's going to be ringing crazy because we're getting down to the draft and the free agent frenzy and everything. Before we let you roll, I was looking at your stats and your numbers. There is a common denominator with your great skill level as a player, and his number was 39. You and Dougie Waite just seemed to click very well out on the ice. Can you figure out exactly what it was, or was it just there was a synergy there?
Yeah, Dougie and I just, hey, look, his game matched up with a lot of people's because he was so good, so skilled, and his vision. But I relied on a guy like him, and Dougie's one of my very best friends, and we got along so well off the ice. But on the ice, we talked about everything. We were always talking about different plays. Our communication was great, and Dougie's such a great teammate. And the one thing was about Dougie, and I don't know if people really understand this, how tough Dougie was.
No.
And we would get into some, back in those days, there some nights got ugly. But I loved it because I always knew Dougie had my back, and I had his back, and it just made it great and fun to play with Dougie. And like I said though, the game part, we're always going back to the bench and hey, next time, what if we do this? What next time? Why don't Billy hit that hole and I'll do this and then I'll hit you there. It was a constant gamesmanship with him, and it was just. He's the best teammate you could ask for.
Well, you guys were a pretty good combo off the ice, as I remember as well, Billy.
We still are.
we're gonna keep certain things on the bus because that's the unspoken rule. But it was clear you were great friends. I remember, you played some with him. You got back together. You don't meet that many guys. Like, there was just something there, and you talked about synergy. That was quite a pair. And when you went, it was one thing. And then when the Oilers could no longer keep him, we know what happened there. I mean, it was tough money-wise before the CBA, and Dougie had stayed. He was making good money, but of course he had stayed at the same pay for a little while, done what he could, and then, we know what happened when he got out of here, what happened to his salary. People like that, you're lucky if you meet one or two in the span of a whole career, aren't you? Guys who are you just click with to that degree.
Yeah, for sure. And there are so many great people in the game that I've become such good friends with, and Doug Waite and Keith Kachuk are two of my closest friends, and it goes well beyond hockey. Our families are thick as thieves, and just great people, and just lucky to, I'm lucky to come out of the game with a ton of friends, and just those two guys in particular are just real special to me.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for waiting almost 200 days to do this interview, by the way. I appreciate that.
It was worth the wait, Brennan. It was worth the wait. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Continued success with the hockey club. It's fun to watch every little move you make, and it's also fun to talk about all those fun days watching you as a player. And thanks for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks a lot, you guys. Great catching up.
So once again, a big thank you to Minnesota Wild General Manager Bill Guerin for joining us on the podcast today. We appreciate his time, especially right now. It's a busy, busy time. Hey, Robin, we were going to talk about this off the top, but we didn't know if we were going to get Bill, so I decided to arbitrarily push it back to this particular segment. But we're going to talk about a guy who is a great professional and a great friend named Dwayne Mandrusiak, longtime equipment manager with the Edmonton Eskimos. 49 years. He started basically just by retrieving, footballs as a ball boy with the Edmonton Eskimos at the age of 13, I believe. Now he's just a little bit older than me, and after 49 years, he was let go unceremoniously by the Edmonton Eskimos. Sorry, the Edmonton, whatever you want to call them this week. But let's talk about the value of loyalty. Here's a guy who basically bled green and gold, and once an Eskimo, always an Eskimo, and was just basically thrown away after 49 years. It's disgusting the way this thing rolled out.
Well, when you talk about what you want to call them this week, I don't know that would go over that well with a lot of fans, because I'm sure they've been called a lot of things. And you talk about loyalty, Bryn. Dwayne Mandrusiak, and if you look at the reaction to what happened this week on social media, knew people and had cared about people and had people care about him from one end of this league to the other. This is not just an Edmonton story. The response to this has been unbelievable. For me, on a personal level, I certainly wasn't, somebody that saw Dwayne a lot. I covered the Eskimos for many years on and off, but no matter who you speak to about Dwayne Mandrusiak, and if you've ever interacted with him, you know what a honest, generous, hardworking, and modest guy he was. Now, we most those platitudes about people maybe too often, but I can't think of a case when it was more true. Equipment manager, 49 years, and when you talk about loyalty, somewhere along the way, the Edmonton Football Club has lost the plot when it comes to loyalty. I get it that there are tough decisions that need to be made, but in the case of Dwayne Mandrusiak, he needed to be the last man standing. If there is no Dwayne Mandrusiak, he needed to be able to go out on his own terms. He wasn't going to hang around till he couldn't do the job, but he's staring at a 50th season. Yes, it's out of the Eskimos' control in terms of the bigger picture, but there are still people operating and drawing salaries with the Edmonton Eskimos. Dwayne Mandrusiak needed to be one of those people.
Would this have been different if it was year 47 or 48, not 49? Because 50 is an unbelievable number. It certainly will warrant a lot of serious thinking about having his name go up on the ring, because it's not just football players. You know, I think Norm Kimball's up there as well. You've got Hugh Campbell, who's up there, who you're talking about a guy who's been with the football team for 49 years. There's going to be a lot of consideration, and should be, to have his name put up on that ring at Commonwealth Stadium. But does it hurt just a little bit more that it's year 49 and not 50 as opposed to 47 and not 50?
Well, I think it
does it matter?
No, I think it does. I think it exaggerates what happened here, because that 50 is a magic mark. But whether it was 50 or 47, you're talking about a 49-year guy. But it's more what he did with those years, Bryn. Anybody around the Eskimos saw that. Quick story. Many years ago, once hockey season was over and my vacation would be used up, I'd help out on the Eskimo beat. So I'd move from hockey to the Eskimos. And being a doughhead, I went to an Eskimo game one night, and I left home. It was sunny and the sky was clear, and I was driving a Jeep at that time. And I took the hard top right off. I didn't even have the bikini top or the soft top on it. I drive to Commonwealth Stadium. Well, by the time we're within an hour of game time, the storm to end all storms has rolled in, and it's raining like effing hell. And it delayed the game, and the advertisements on the side of the field, which were just cardboard at that time, they weren't the electronic ones they are now. They were blowing around and they were floating away. And I went outside to look at my Jeep, and it was a joke. I had 3 inches of water inside my Jeep on the carpet. My fault. Dumbass move. Somehow Dwayne got wind of this. I think guys were giving me shots in the dressing room after the game. Hey, dumbass, have a nice ride home. So, Dwayne must have heard from somebody about what had happened. So he grabs this stack of towels, Gatorade towels. I swear they were as tall as he was.
5'5". 5'5".
And he on his toes, yeah. And he hands them to me. He says, "Brownie, here you go. Take these for the ride home." For the ride home. So I've still, here I am after the game. We file our stories. I'm driving along. Now it's still driving rain, and I'm driving down White Mud Drive on my way home, and people are looking at this guy driving in his Jeep with his top down in a absolute downpour. I mean, the rain is horizontal, for crying out loud. What's this dumbass doing? I used those towels to soak up all the water out of the Jeep, and I've still got a handful of those things left today. And that was, I don't know how long ago. He just, that was Dwayne. There are people with those kind of stories, not dumbass stories about getting their car flooded, but where Dwayne just said, "Hey, what can I do? Here, let me do this." The community stuff, the working with, the working with Joe Moss with the Eskimos.
Yeah.
Dwayne was a guy, again, it's not a matter of seniority. That plays into it. It's what he did during those 49 years, the relationships he struck, and the friends he made right across this league. If there was ever a situation, as I said before, where somebody deserved at least the opportunity to go out on their own terms, it was Dwayne Mandrusiak. This is just wrong on every level.
And having worked in the media for over 30 plus years, I've seen this kind of rollout of employees happen frequently, where guys are basically walked to the door and asked to turn in their cards and that kind of stuff. So you get a little battle weary when you see it, but it's still horribly disappointing. In the Edmonton area too, we've been blessed because not only do we have Dwayne to deal with here with the Edmonton Eskimos back in the day. But we also had great people with the Oilers in Kenny Lowe and Barry Stafford and Sparky Kolchilski. And that didn't appear to end very well for those guys either after serving the hockey club for so many years. We don't know the backstory, though. I know that, for example, Barry Stafford was asked to help basically generate a more positive feel with the alumni. And I can't speak for Sparky or Kenny Lowe, but there's just no easy way to do it. But 49 years getting to almost 50, I never saw it coming from the Community Football Club. I just didn't. It caught me off guard to the point where I was so speechless all week.
No,
I didn't even reach out to Dwayne until the weekend, and then we exchanged a few text messages. He's okay. I think he got blindsided without any doubt, but it's just disappointing.
Yeah, and Dwayne's going to be okay. He's at an age after that tenure with the Eskimos where I'm hoping he's fine. He doesn't have to worry about finding another job. I mean, when you're 60, I don't think he's going to pack up his stuff and go find another town to do his gig. That 50 is tempting, I guess, but no, it's just, I get the business end of it. We've seen it many times. We see it in our industry with good reporters, good media relations people, good coaches for that matter. It's part of the gig. Nobody stays forever. So without getting overwrought about it, the point is, it's just too bad to see a guy like Dwayne Mandrusiak go this way, not his way.
And you're absolutely right. The response around the Canadian Football League has been quite, everybody's been disappointed. There's no denying that. And anyway, just another one of the great people in a great fun football league, and a lot of stories to be told about Dwayne. Many of them over a cold barley malt product and not on a podcast. Anyway, so best of luck to Dwayne. I know he's going to be fine. I think we all got his back. That's it had to be mentioned. Coming up on the podcast next time, which will be podcast number 27, Chris Cuthbert. Chris was our first guest on The Outsiders, and at that time was working for TSN and was the longtime voice of the Canadian Football League. But of course, a lot has changed in the last year. He decided to make the jump from TSN to Sportsnet, and did a great job with Louis DeBrusque in the bubble on all the Western Conference games, but looking very much forward to talking to Chris about that move, talking to him about the bubble and how everything has gone. But we're going back to the number one guy, the guy that we talked to the very first time. So I'm looking forward to the conversation on the next one.
Absolutely.
Robin, before we go, there's a couple of little house cleaning things we've got to talk about. It's, we've had a lot of fun doing this podcast, but people can always email us. All you have to do is drop us a note at mightymouth@shaw.ca. That's mightymouth@shaw.ca, and we'll get back to people as quickly as we possibly can. The Twitter feed is picking up speed too. All you have to do is go to our simple handle, which is this, at Outsiders 2020. Outsiders is all in caps. I don't know if that really matters, but it's at Outsiders 2020. That's our Twitter feed. You've done a nice job of kind of keeping people more up to speed on that than I have. But make sure you tell your friends. Subscribe to our RSS feed. And, of course, we're on all the favorite ear candy sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts. The number one site that people are finding us is on Apple. Number two surprises me, actually. It's Pocket Casts. And by a fair bit. Yeah. By a fair bit too, and I do have that app on my iPhone, and I do love it. It's great. The other thing too is sponsorship. We got to thank the Macintosh Group at Remax River City for coming on board. Brent McIntosh is there. One of the things, the mortgage rates are pretty good right now, and if the interest rates are of interest of anybody, then I would suggest this is a good time to upgrade, maybe to a bigger property, because you can get a great bang for your buck. And so all you have to do is check out the realtors from the Macintosh Group at Remax River City. They'd love to help you with any questions you might have or a potential purchase. So give Brent a call over there, and we'll have Brent on maybe on one of our podcasts just for a couple of minutes, just to kind of bring us up to speed on what's going on with him.
Well, I just want to echo what you said, Brent. You usually take care of that, but it's great to have Brent aboard. We love doing this, but if there's people out there who'd like to get their brand out there, and they like what we do, and they'd like to come aboard as a sponsor, hey, please let us know. We're hoping to gain momentum again that we thought we had months ago. We're back at it now. It's important to us to keep doing what we're doing because we enjoy it. It would be nice to have some people come on board as Brent has. So if you're interested, please contact Bryn. Please DM me if you want on Twitter. And we'll keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully we hear from some of you out there.
Robin, thanks, and we'll talk to you next time, okay?
Okay, let's get out of here.
Proceeding was recorded earlier because we were ashamed to do it now.